Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, second part there of the 13th of July 2024. We're going to start today by talking a little bit more about restrictions placed upon Ukraine for their use of Western provided weapons into Russia. Okay, let's try and get a little bit more context concerning this. Zelensky's made a comment here. In fact, we're going to read the whole Zelensky thread because I think it is useful. So today, he said on the 11th, so 2 days ago now, today I addressed the NATO-Ukraine Council. Our fight is not just about Ukraine defending against Russia's full-scale aggression, but about protecting the rules-based world order. We do not allow wars of aggression to benefit the aggressor. This is why the alliance was created, to make sure that those who wage a criminal war against another nation will lose. When our decisions are strong, we ensure the irreversibility of this course. I am grateful for every air defense system that works to save the lives of our people. I am grateful for the decision on new Patriots and other air defense systems for Ukraine. These systems need to be delivered to Ukraine as soon as possible. We must protect all our cities, and our partners can help with this. Every announced military package must be delivered to the front as quickly as possible. So this is the idea that certain packages just are taking way too long. Certain packages are announced, and then they put orders in, and you wait for the stuff to be made, and then so on and so forth. When this happens, Putin fails, and this is vital. I'm grateful for the permission given to us to strike Russian territory along our border. Thanks to this decision and the courage of our soldiers, we thwarted the Russian offensive on Kharkiv. HIMARS hit military targets near the border, burning Putin's calculations. ATACMS, Scalps and Storm Shadows would be even more effective if we could hit Russian military airfields from which planes carrying the glided bombs take off. From where? Russia is launching about 3,500 such bombs every month. It's only fair to destroy those military bases that are attacking us and killing our people. Each of you would defend yourselves in the same way. We need this permission from our partners, and most importantly from the United States. We need a sufficient number of F-16s. Russia used about 300 combat aircraft. We need at least half of that. Training missions for pilots must expand. How many years will we wait for half of 300 aircraft at the current speed of supply and training? The war shouldn't last that long. And in the case of the F-16s, it's not up to us. I'm grateful for the NATO-Ukraine Council, created to make our path to the alliance visible. And the real ticket for Ukraine to join NATO is a just end to this war. Without Ukraine in NATO, European security will never be complete. Ukraine outside of the alliance is a temptation for Russia to try aggression again and again, to become an invader, to go into Ukraine and other countries, and this is why all formats of our cooperation, including this one, should be a bridge to Ukraine's victory in this war. Our victory should become a bridge to lasting peace for all of Europe. All this must be based on one strong word: invitation. Ukraine deserves an invitation to NATO. This certainty will irreversibly become the alliance's new strong pillar. Our only strong decisions make winners. And he's absolutely right. Europe really need to be strong right now, because if Ukraine is allowed to prevail, if Russia is allowed to prevail, then that sets the cracks in the EU project and turns them into chasms. And I think the strength of the EU lies in the hands of their reaction to the Russian aggression and the success of Ukraine here. But it seems patently obvious that the US hold the key to Ukraine's success for many reasons, one of which is the ability to strike at these airfields. And it's ATACMS, Scalps and Storm Shadows there are placed together, but it's the idea that the US is the main player here. We need this permission from our partners, and most importantly from the US, he said. Then we had this idea that the Storm Shadows decision was reversed, or it wasn't reversed, it was misinterpreted, or it was given, the permission was given by Keir Starmer, but the US came in and said, no, you can't do that. And people are sort of disagreeing on what's going on there. The Times has an article that states under defence agreements, the UK has to have the approval of two allies, one of which is understood to be France, which manufactures Storm Shadows alongside the UK. The other is another undisclosed NATO ally. The question is whether that is Italy or the US. Here, John Ridge says this reporting makes no sense on several levels. The targeting restrictions placed on Ukraine are political in nature, not legal. Unless it was bizarrely codified in Ukraine's end user license, there is no legal framework for the UK or France to restrict Ukraine's employment. So under defence agreements, the UK has to have the approval of two allies, one of which is France, which manufactures Storm Shadows alongside the UK, said the Times, as I've said. The other is another undisclosed NATO ally. Storm Shadow missiles, blah, 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 blah. The UK has made a formal request to both allies in recent days, and ministers are awaiting approval before giving Ukraine permission. Quote, this is not just ticking a box, it's quite a serious decision, said a defence source, adding that Starmer had spoken too soon. Quote, the intent remains positive, they added. So this is saying that not that Starmer's flip-flopped, but that Starmer made a pledge to Ukraine that was above and beyond what he was able to do. And the clarification came from the MOD saying, actually, we don't have the permission to use those missiles into Russia, or Ukraine doesn't have the permission. So this is the idea that Starmer had the right approach to the war and to anti-escalation, etc., etc., but his hands are tied, and he didn't realise his hands were tied. Now, you could talk about not being briefed well enough, but so that's one option there. But then John Ridge says it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is political in nature, not legal. In other words, if it is political, then Starmer should be able to say that, and that's that. So then the question is, well, is it indeed the Americans saying, no, you can't do that? Even though you want to do that, you can't do that. Who knows? Shashank Joshi says, another key NATO ally, talking about that quote, I pay some attention to this report from April. Italy has also provided Storm Shadows. Russia has no way of knowing whether the missile that hits their target is British, French or Italian. Hence, a coordinated policy on strikes in Russia would make sense. So this is the idea that Italy had previously said that you can't use Italian weaponry inside Russia. And even though Giorgia Meloni is very strong on that, she is either herself somewhat cautious with weaponry inside Russia, or someone like Matteo Salvini is curtailing her, that's her deputy prime minister who is very pro-Russian, is curtailing her intentions. So it could well be that Italy is saying, because we're one of the manufacturing partners here and we don't want weapons to be used inside Russia in this way, that actually they're the ones stopping the UK from allowing Storm Shadows to be used inside Russia. So again, I don't know. My guess is it's the US, but it could be Italy. And my main conclusion is I don't think it's the UK. I think our hands are tied. So the question is, well, how can the Prime Minister have his hands tied? Like, who is tying the leader of the country? And then it goes back to, what is it, a legal obligation or legally binding scenario, which John Ridge seems to say, well, no, it's a political thing. I can't see that it's legal. So I don't know. It's one of these things that's going on, but it's just deeply frustrating because it appears you've got Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister of our country saying, yeah, you can do that, and then getting his knuckles rapped for some reason. Whether it's the US, whether it's Italy, I don't know. Poland's foreign minister on the same kind of thing has said on Ukraine using US weapons on military targets deep inside Russia. And Sikorsky, there's several people inside Europe who you just got to think are nailing it every time. Radoslav Sikorsky, the foreign minister for Poland, married to Anne Applebaum, he is always on point. Gabrielis Landsbergis, the foreign minister for Lithuania, I'm going to be reading one of his threads on my Geopolitics video, that he's just unbelievably on point. You've got Kaja Kallas from Estonia, you've got Mette Frederiksen from Denmark, the Estonian and Danish leaders there, and I think you've got Emmanuel Macron in France, who's been on point loads, but unfortunately the political maelstrom in the French political landscape is meaning that he's taken a step back from some of this very strong rhetoric. But there are four and a half, if you like, leaders who are being very robust in their opinions, and I think they need to be listened to. He said days ago, Sikorsky, the Russians hit a children's hospital. Would it really be escalatory to take down the strategic bombers that launch these missiles, or to hit the airport from which they fly? It seems so bleeding obvious, doesn't it? It's just insanely frustrating. So well done to him for that opinion. He's then gone on to say, so then there are these ideas that Poland could be helping Ukraine in the west of Ukraine by sending up their fighters to take down Russian cruise missiles or hypersonic missiles or whatever, or drones that are flying deep into western Ukraine near the Polish border, or air defense systems could be used. That was touted, and then it was kind of reversed. But he's come out and said that they are considering downing Russian missiles over Ukraine. Quote, at this stage, this is an idea. What our agreements, our bilateral agreement said, is we will explore this idea, Polish Foreign Minister Sikorsky said, calling the potential move self-defense. Goes on, the Kyiv Independent goes on to say his remarks come days after Polish Defense Minister, goodness me, Władysław Kozyniak-Kamysz said Poland will not comply with Ukraine's request to shoot down Russian missiles without NATO's decision. So they don't want it to be a kind of bilateral thing between Ukraine and Poland, because then that might get Poland involved in the war without the backing of NATO. But I don't think NATO would give Poland the permission, certainly not on behalf of NATO, to do something like that. So it's really frustrating. And Poland would have to do that from a bilateral positioning, which carries with it an awful lot of risks, right? Okay, going on to general military aid and equipment. Ukraine will receive up to 100,000 shells a month from the Czech Republic. So apparently they've received 50,000 this month and will receive 50,000 next month, which is already really good, because if you think they were firing, 2,000 shells a day has been generally what's been thought to be the fire rate for the Ukrainians for some time now. Russians up to 10,000 a day, although I'm really not sure what the latest figures are for either. But let's say 2,000 a day. 50,000 a month gives you almost 2,000 a day anyway, just from the Czech initiative. Then you're adding on what the US is providing, UK, Germany, they're manufacturing. You've got France a little bit. You've got all over Europe, Bulgaria, Czechia, South Korea, Australia, all these places at least are making, ramping up their production, and you would imagine to either backfill or to provide to Ukraine. So if the Czech initiative is already providing the large majority of what Ukraine would be firing anyway, then their fire rate should be able to rise considerably. And then if you're talking about 100,000 shells from September onwards, that is 3,300 shells a day, give or take, right? And that then is 1.5 times what they are firing, with all of their shells that they're making. Oh, I forgot about the ones they make themselves as well. So, if they're getting 3,300 a day from the Czech initiative, then everything else adds to that. And you can imagine they will have got up to, 4,000-5,000 a day, who knows? But it's over double what they had been firing. And if they are firing these shells better than the Russians, if they have better targeting and precision on their with their equipment and the quality of the shells, then they will have more effect. So you have 4,000 shells having a better effect maybe than, I don't know how many Russia are going to continue to fire, 10,000, but then do they have the barrels? These are all issues that both sides will have: maintenance, barrels, and all the wear and tear, and also destruction and damage from drones and counter battery and whatnot. But it is definitely looking better for the Ukrainians. Peter Pavel, the Czech president, said that 50,000 rounds in July and August, and from September to the end of the year, 80 to 100,000 will be delivered per month. I don't know how long for. Of course, there was talk about it being 500,000, 800,000, a million, 1.3 million, and they could be finding more and more. And it could be that the Estonian initiative that was alongside that, Estonia came out and then said, well, we found another like million or whatever it was. So it could be that got absorbed into the Czech initiative, and they're just going to continue finding these shells from around the world and getting them to Ukraine. Now, the US has disclosed that Ukraine is the intended recipient of a new, relatively low-cost precision-guided air-launched standoff munition, and is looking to start development, which could have a range of up to 250 miles. That's 400 kilometers. This could be really good news for Ukraine. We could have a relatively cheap weapon that could be used to strike air bases and whatnot inside Russia. What's the point of having 250 miles if the occupied territory doesn't stretch that far? So this would require restrictions to be lifted so that you can actually get the 400 kilometers out there, unless you're just talking about getting all of Crimea up to the Kerch Bridge. Okay, maybe, but 400 kilometers would be incredibly useful in terms of taking out air bases that are close enough for Ukraine, for Russia to be able to hit Ukraine's cities like Kharkiv. Really good news. How long will it take, and will those restrictions be shifted? Now, Northrop Grumman, who are an American industrial concern, have signed an agreement to manufacture weapons inside Ukraine, making it the first US company to take that step. As I've mentioned before, we will be producing weapons in Ukraine by Ukrainians with the cooperation of a US company, said Stephen O'Brien. So more on that as that develops. Again, what are the timeframes and what will they be producing? On the sidelines of NATO summit, together with French President Macron, we discussed, says Zelensky, the preparation of the next defence package, security cooperation and training of our military. There's going to be training of Mirage 5, the Mirage 2000-5 pilots. That is on the cards, but it's going to be interesting to see what Macron gives as a military aid package to Ukraine and when that will come. Eyes peeled for that one. Now, talking about airframes here, Ukraine expects to receive 6 F-16s by this summer and up to 20 by the end of the year. I presume that's 20 in total, which doesn't sound like an awful lot, but you know, these things take time, and it's, you don't want to flood Ukraine with so many F-16s that they become just easy to target. It's going to be a very carefully orchestrated project to get F-16s used in Ukraine. And I think if you're talking about, say, 128 F-16s, you have to have the help of surrounding neighbours to just say that they're doing maintenance there. We've taken them back to maintenance. You just have this schedule whereby most of your planes are being maintained outside of Ukraine at any given time. And then when you need them, like I said before, you just fly them into an airbase, fill them up with fuel and weapons, and then get them up in the air and then get them back to Romania. So yeah, no, needs a bit more tinkering around the, I think the vector thrust exhaust manifold tractor beam needs a little bit of turning to the left. No, that's right. Oh, you know what you're doing. They need that a lot, and then it keeps those airframes safe. Just, you know, you've got to take the mickey because Russia are blowing up children's hospitals. You know, it just blows my mind. Anyway, it's going to be fascinating to see how these are integrated into the existing infrastructure. There are, as I mentioned earlier, rumours that F-16s have been flying from Romania already over the Odessa region. I have no idea whether that's true, but there are some rumours to suggest that is the case. Belgium will supply 30 F-16s, but not until 2028, said Ihor Zovka, deputy head of the presidential office. Quote, Belgium has declared 30 planes, and this is in our security agreement with Belgium, and it says that these 30 planes will be delivered by the end of 2028, which is obviously unacceptable to us, as Zovka said. So they are getting them, but just they will take a long time. I don't know why, whether it's they are still in use with the Belgians and they're not phasing them out quickly enough, or whether they need that much work doing to them, or whether it's, you know, I don't know what the reasons are. French aid to Ukraine says, as NATO countries have begun the transfer of F-16s to Ukraine, it should be noted that they will be equipped with Safran's A2SM Hammer bombs. Those are the guided glide bombs. that the Ukrainians use, those French ones that are being really well utilized by the Ukrainians. They are getting, or they were getting, 50 a month of those, up to the tune of 600 over a year. But I think that's been extended and possibly expanded as well. So yeah, adaptation to the F-16s, and there it is. There's the Hammer. Yeah, a significant amount of work is being carried out, he said on May the 3rd, to adapt the Hammer bombs to the F-16s that will be delivered to Ukraine. So this could represent sort of delays to some of those F-16s. Who knows? But yeah, we'll obviously keep an eye on the F-16 situation. Now, Argentine Defense Minister Luis Petri has announced he's quite the dish. Thank you. I'm here all day. Announced his readiness to supply weapons to Ukraine. Earlier, that's such a bad joke. Earlier, there were reports about Argentina's alleged plans to transfer two Mi-171E transport helicopters to Ukraine. Unfortunately, the supply of spare parts and overhaul of the helicopters turned out to be problematic, and therefore both aircraft are not currently in operation. So I don't know if that means that they won't get those helicopters at all, or whether it'll just be a huge delay. Petri stressed that neutrality, quote, is no longer a viable option in the current international context. So Argentina, for all their issues and their current economic situation and political situation, that is, well, it depends what flavour of politics you like, but it's certainly challenging for the Argentinians right now. They are being very strong on both Ukraine and indeed Israel, actually. Argentina have just come out or Milei has just come out and declared Hamas a terrorist organisation officially, and they are the first South American nation to do that. Anyway, I digress. Argentina may also supply light weapons ammunition, mortar shells, and 155mm artillery shells. Those last two will certainly be, all of that will be incredibly useful. Mortar shells and artillery ammo, Ukraine just need by the bucket load. MOD from Estonia said, we are happy to announce that the second delivery from the IT coalition has arrived in Ukraine. This shipment of network equipment will help increase the capacity in the data centers and enhance the cybersecurity capabilities of defense Ukraine and the armed forces of Ukraine. So good news there. And German aid to Ukraine says, my latest piece on the idea that during NATO summit in Washington, Germany's Minister of Defense Boris Pistorius announced a new drone initiative under which partner countries are to jointly procure German and Latvian-made drones to assist Ukraine. So this is one of those things that is to the benefit of the industrial military complex in Germany, and therefore German tax dollars. And that's what, like, it sounds a bit like mercenary, if you like, or, you know, if you are going to provide an awful lot of stuff to Ukraine, there's going to be at some point your taxpayers are going to be saying, hang on, enough's enough. So you have to say, well, no, actually, this is a stimulus to our own economy. And we sorted out this coalition where we're going to help Ukraine. But actually, people will be buying into our stuff, so we benefit. So is that all right, guys? And everyone's like, okay, that's a bit better. And it could be that it's approached like that. So if the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has now been going on for 2.5 years, has taught us anything, then it's that drones have become an integral part of the modern battlefield, says Germany to Ukraine. On the second day of the NATO anniversary summit in Washington, Germany's Minister of Defense Boris Pistorius presented a new initiative as part of the Capability Coalition drones, so this is part of the drone initiative, but it's like a subsection, that's how I understand it, which aims to help Ukraine in its fight against the Russian military. The idea is that the German industry, along with the Latvian industry, will provide the necessary production capacities, while NATO partners can jointly utilize them for Ukraine. Interestingly, British manufacturers have been left out of this initiative. That's the first thing I thought, which is the British are leading the drone initiative with Latvia. So Germany have come along. There could be some interesting internal politicking going on here, and it might not help that the UK are outside the EU. This is one of those things where it could be that it's easier for Germany and Latvia to work together, both from geographical proximity as well as organizational proximity and tariffs and whatnot. And that money stays in the EU. So if you're appealing to other EU countries and say, look, there's this drone initiative going on, you guys don't make many drones. So like you go to Spain, you guys aren't making like the kind of drones that Ukraine needs. I don't know, I made that up. But we are. You can either invest in the Latvian and German drones, and then the UK is going, hang on, wait, what about us? And then Spain is saying, well, we have to pay all these tariffs on that, and actually we need to keep the money inside the EU because that then turns into tax revenue that goes back into the EU, and it's a money multiplier. And again, here's one of your issues. I don't want to get Brexit again, but here is an issue that people are going to prefer to spend inside the EU rather than outside the EU, and that's just the nature of the beast, and that will disadvantage the UK not just in terms of this war, but in everything going forward. You know, like I talked to you before, if you're going to get inward investment going into a market like the European market as a continent, you have a choice of setting up in the EU as, say, an American investor and say, right, we're going to spend $1 billion setting up here so that we can access 500 million people free, or we spend $1 billion in the UK where we can access 70 million people free, but have to pay tariffs to access 500 million. Whereas if we set up in EU, we can access 500 million people for free and pay tariffs on 70 million people. You are always going to set up in the EU. It's just like I was explaining this to my dad before, like I debated this in publicly actually in Bournemouth before the Brexit election referendum, just saying, look, I don't understand that people are trying to win the economic argument from a Leave point of view. You just can't do it. You can do it on immigration, yeah. You can do it on these other things, sovereignty or whatever. We can have that debate, but you won't win it on the economic argument, because we will have to just give away tax. Give such massive tax break incentives, or ruin our own workers' rights or environmental rights, so that you can make things so cheaply that it overcomes the tariffs of accessing 500 million people. And then that's no use to us, because you're just destroying the environment and having low paid workers with no rights, and we're not getting the tax revenues that we would otherwise be entitled to. So it's a real challenge. So I know this is getting all political here, but you need to understand what might be going on here with regard to Germany sort of pushing the UK out of, even though we're leading the drone coalition, to saying, look, we're going to manufacture these drones with Latvia, and you guys are welcome in the drone coalition to buy from us. That might be what's going on, because it might be to do with tariffs and the challenges there. Anyway, I won't go any further into this. You can go and read German Aid to Ukraine himself. Always worth popping in to DE, so it's Germany, Deutschland, deaidua.org. And you can find out more about the decision from Germany and Latvia. Anyway, thanks for watching. Really appreciate the time you spend with me. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.